A billionaire CEO took his girlfriend out for dinner, but when he saw his ex-wife pregnant, he was, picture this, a man who seemingly has it all, money, power, and influence, steps into one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. He's Ethan Grayson, a billionaire CEO whose life is a perfect blend of luxury and control. By his side is Vanessa Carter, a stunning model who fits effortlessly into his world of glamour and prestige. Everything seems flawless. The crystal chandeliers casting soft light over immaculate tables, the aroma of truffle butter lingering in the air. But tonight, something will shatter Ethan's carefully constructed reality. It starts with just a glance, a fleeting moment that sends shockwaves through him. Across the room, he spots her, Clara Bennett, his ex-wife, balancing a tray loaded with elegant dishes. But there's something else about her now, something undeniable. She's pregnant, and in that instant, Ethan's polished exterior begins to crack. The scene unfolds like a storm, brewing on a calm horizon. Ethan adjusts the Rolex on his wrist, trying to maintain his composure. But inside, chaos brews. Who is the father? Why didn't she tell him? These questions swirl in his mind as he struggles to focus on Vanessa's conversation about next week's charity gala. For years, Ethan had prided himself on being untouchable, someone who always stayed ahead of the game. Yet here he is, blindsided by a revelation that forces him to confront emotions he thought he'd buried long ago. As viewers, we're drawn into his turmoil because we've all been there, faced with moments that challenge everything we believe about ourselves. This isn't just Ethan's story. It's a human story about love, regret, and the choices that define us. Clara, meanwhile, carries herself with quiet resilience. Her presence at the restaurant feels almost symbolic, a stark contrast to Ethan's opulent lifestyle. Where he thrives on control, she embodies strength born from adversity. Their eyes meet briefly, and though neither says a word, the tension between them speaks volumes. We see flashes of their past together, a marriage marked by ambition on one side and longing on the other. Clara wanted a family, a dream Ethan dismissed as impractical. Amidst his relentless pursuit of success, now, standing before him, visibly carrying new life, she represents everything he once pushed away. The question looms large. What happens when the person you let go comes back into your life in a way you never expected? As Ethan wrestles with his emotions, we begin to peel back the layers of his character. On the surface, he appears invincible, a man who commands respect wherever he goes. But beneath that confident facade lies vulnerability, an ache for connection he's too afraid to admit. His decision to follow Clara after spotting her reveals not only his desperation for answers, but also his inability to let go. When he corners her in the hallway, demanding an explanation, we witness the raw intensity of their unresolved history. "Is that what I think it is?" he asks, his voice low yet sharp. Clara meets his gaze without flinching, her response measured, yet laced with pain. "This isn't a conversation we should be having here," she says, turning away before he can press further. What follows is a journey of self-discovery, not just for Ethan, but for Clara as well. Both characters are grappling with their own truths, each shaped by the scars of their shared past. Ethan's reaction to Clara's pregnancy exposes the cracks in his carefully curated image. For years, he viewed children as a distant possibility, something to consider only when life became perfect. But perfection, as he's beginning to realize, is an illusion. Clara, on the other hand, made the difficult choice to leave Ethan rather than force him into a role he wasn't ready to embrace. Her decision to keep the pregnancy a secret stems not from malice, but from a desire to protect both herself and her unborn child. Watching these two navigate their tangled emotions creates a compelling narrative that keeps audiences invested. The stakes rise even higher as Ethan becomes increasingly determined to insert himself into Clara's life and the life of her baby. His persistence borders on obsession, driven by guilt, anger, and a growing sense of responsibility. Yet every attempt to connect with Clara is met with resistance. She doesn't trust him, and rightfully so. Their interactions are charged with emotion, each exchange revealing more about their fractured relationship. One particularly tense encounter occurs late at night outside her apartment building. Ethan confronts her about visiting a fertility specialist during their marriage, accusing her of hiding her intentions. Clara fires back, her voice steady, despite the tears threatening to spill. "I wanted a child, Ethan. I wanted a family. But you made it clear that wasn't part of your plan." In that moment, we see the depth of her pain and the weight of the sacrifices she's made. Throughout the story, secondary characters add richness to the narrative. Vanessa, Ethan's girlfriend, serves as a foil to Clara, highlighting the superficiality of Ethan's previous relationships. Meanwhile, Lucas, Harper, the empathetic restaurant manager, provides a glimpse of what Clara might have found comfort in had circumstances been different. His protective demeanor toward Clara hints at unspoken feelings, further complicating Ethan's already fragile state of mind. Is Lucas simply looking out for a friend? Or is there something more beneath the surface? These subtle dynamics keep viewers guessing and deepen the emotional complexity of the plot. As the story progresses, unexpected twists push the characters to their limits. Clara's health takes a turn for the worse, forcing Ethan to step up in ways he never imagined. Rushing her to the hospital, holding her hand during labor, and witnessing the birth of their son transforms him in profound ways. For the first time, Ethan experiences a love so pure and unconditional that it shakes him to his core. Looking down at the tiny bundle in Clara's arms, he realizes how much he's missed, not just in her life, but in his own. "He has your eyes," Clara whispers, a simple statement that carries immense weight. In that moment, Ethan understands that redemption isn't about reclaiming what was lost. It's about becoming someone worthy of a second chance. But the road to healing is far from smooth. While Ethan makes genuine efforts to change, Clara remains cautious. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. She sees glimpses of the man Ethan could become, but old wounds run deep. Their journey forward is uncertain, filled with hope and hesitation in equal measure. As Ethan stands in the doorway, watching Clara tuck their son, Liam, into bed, we sense a shift within him. He's no longer the same man who walked into La Lumiere weeks ago, yet the question remains, will Clara ever fully open her heart to him again? Or will the ghosts of their past continue to haunt their future? With unresolved tension hanging in the air, our story pauses here, leaving viewers eager to know what happens next. Can Ethan prove himself not just as a father, but as a partner? Will Clara find it in her heart to forgive him? Or will the distance between them prove insurmountable? These are the questions that drive the narrative forward, keeping audiences hooked until the very end. Ethan's mind raced as he replayed the confrontation with Clara. Over and over again, her words, sharp, deliberate, and laced with years of unspoken pain, cut deeper than he cared to admit. He had always prided himself on being a man who could solve any problem with logic and strategy. But this wasn't a business deal or a boardroom negotiation. This was personal, raw, and messy. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt utterly powerless, sitting in his penthouse office late at night, surrounded by sleek furniture and framed awards that suddenly seemed meaningless, he realized how little he truly knew about Clara. She had wanted a family, a dream he had dismissed without a second thought during their marriage. And now, here she was, carrying his child, a child conceived not out of shared joy, but born from her decision to move on without him. The revelation about Clara visiting a fertility specialist before their divorce gnawed at him relentlessly. It painted a picture of a woman desperate for something more, someone willing to fight for her dreams, even when they weren't reciprocated. Ethan couldn't shake the image of Clara sitting alone in a doctor's office, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, things would work out. The guilt weighed heavily on him, mixing with anger, not at Clara, but at himself. How had he been so blind? Had he really believed that Clara existed, merely to complement his success? These questions haunted him, pushing him further into self-doubt, while fueling his determination to make amends. Meanwhile, Clara found herself caught between exhaustion and fear. The physical toll of pregnancy was compounded by the emotional strain of Ethan's persistent presence in her life. Every time she saw him outside the restaurant or received one of his calls, it reopened old wounds she thought had healed. Yet, there was no denying the sincerity in his actions. He wasn't the same man who had coldly dismissed her desires years ago. Still, trust wasn't something she could give easily, especially not to someone who had once valued control above all else. Lucas noticed the change in her demeanor, sensing the internal battle she was fighting. One evening, after closing up the restaurant, he gently pressed her for answers. "You don't have to tell me everything, Clara," he said, his voice soft yet firm. "But if you're carrying this burden alone, let me help." His kindness brought tears to her eyes, reminding her of what she had missed. A partner who listened, who cared, without expecting anything in return. As weeks passed, Ethan's attempts to insert himself into Clara's life grew bolder. He began showing up unannounced at her apartment, bringing groceries, or offering to pay her medical bills. Each gesture was met with resistance, though Clara couldn't deny the practical relief they provided. Their interactions were charged with tension, neither fully trusting the other's intentions. One particularly heated argument erupted when Ethan accused her of hiding the pregnancy out of spite. "Do you think I kept this from you because I wanted revenge?" Clara snapped, her voice trembling with emotion. "I did it because I knew. You wouldn't understand. You never understood." Ethan recoiled as if struck, realizing too late that his accusations only widened the gap between them. Yet, despite the volatility of their encounters, moments of vulnerability crept through the cracks. Once, as they stood in silence outside her building, Ethan quietly admitted, "I failed you, Clara. I failed us." Those words lingered in the air, unresolved but impossible to ignore. Tensions reached a boiling point when Ethan confronted Lucas directly. Standing near the restaurant entrance, he demanded to know why Lucas seemed so invested in Clara's well-being. "Who are you to her?" Ethan asked, his tone accusatory. Lucas didn't flinch, meeting Ethan's glare head-on. "Someone who cares about her," he replied simply. "Something you clearly forgot how to do." The exchange left both men simmering with resentment, though Clara quickly intervened before things escalated further. As she stepped between them, Ethan saw the protective way Lucas looked at her, and jealousy surged within him. Was Lucas more than just a friend? The thought gnawed at him, adding another layer of complexity to an already tangled situation. Then came the night that changed everything. Clara, feeling increasingly unwell, collapsed in her apartment hallway. Her neighbor, frantic and unsure what to do, called Ethan, the only number she could find in Clara's emergency contacts. When Ethan arrived, panic clawed at his chest. Seeing Clara pale and in pain, clutching her belly, shattered whatever remaining walls he had built around his emotions. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms and rushed her to the hospital, ignoring the protests of those around him. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not his pride, not his fears. Only Clara and the unborn baby. At the hospital, time seemed to stretch endlessly. Clara endured wave after wave of contractions, her body betraying her as the baby decided. It was ready to enter the world far earlier than planned. Ethan stayed by her side throughout, gripping her hand tightly and whispering reassurances. For the first time, he allowed himself to be fully present, letting go of the need to control every detail. When Liam finally entered the world, tiny and fragile but alive, Ethan felt a surge of emotion, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Looking down at his son, nestled in Clara's arms, he understood what true responsibility meant. But even as joy filled the room, uncertainty loomed large. Would Clara ever forgive him? Could they build a future together? Or was this bond destined to remain fractured? With Liam now part of their lives, Ethan threw himself into proving his commitment. He restructured his schedule, delegated tasks at work, and immersed himself in fatherhood. Awkward diaper changes and sleepless nights became small victories, each step forward earning him a fraction of Clara's trust. Yet for all his efforts, Clara remained guarded. She appreciated his transformation, but struggled to reconcile the man standing before her with the one who had broken her heart. Their relationship teetered precariously on the edge of possibility, neither collapsing nor fully healing. One sunny afternoon, as Ethan held Liam in the park, he turned to Clara with a mixture of hope and desperation. "I can't change the past," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "But I can promise you this. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt my love again." Clara stared at him, torn between skepticism and longing. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges neither of them could predict. But as Ethan watched her tuck Liam into bed that evening, a quiet smile playing on his lips, he knew one thing for certain. He was finally ready to embrace the messiness of life, the beauty of imperfection, and the power of redemption. As weeks turned into months, Ethan's transformation became undeniable. He wasn't the same man who had walked into La Lumiere that fateful night. The once rigid and unyielding CEO now found joy in the smallest moments, watching Liam grip his finger, hearing Clara laugh at something he said, or simply sitting quietly as a family in the park. But despite these changes, Clara still held back, her trust fractured by years of disappointment. She appreciated everything Ethan was doing, but she couldn't shake the fear that this version of him might not last. One evening, as they sat together on the couch after putting Liam to bed, Clara finally voiced what had been weighing on her mind. "Ethan," she began hesitantly, "I see how hard you're trying, and I know you mean well. But what happens when life gets messy again? When work demands more of your time, or when things don't go according to plan?" Her words hung in the air, raw and honest. Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. For the first time, he didn't rush to defend himself. Instead, he took a deep breath and met her gaze. "Clara, I can't promise I won't make mistakes," he admitted, "but I can promise you this. I'll never stop fighting for us. Not because I have to, but because I want to." The sincerity in his voice struck a chord within her. It was a moment of vulnerability she hadn't expected from him. one that reminded her of why she had fallen in love with him all those years ago. Still, she needed more than promises. Trust, she knew, would take time, and actions spoke louder than words. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a charity gala hosted by Vanessa, Ethan had reluctantly agreed to attend, knowing it would be good for business. But as the evening wore on, he found himself growing increasingly uncomfortable. Vanessa, ever the socialite, clung to his arm, introducing him to influential figures and basking in the attention they received as a couple. To everyone else, they seemed like the perfect pair, polished, powerful, and untouchable. Yet, as Ethan stood there listening to Vanessa talk about their upcoming photo shoot, his thoughts kept drifting back to Clara and Liam. It was then that Vanessa noticed something different about him. "You've changed, Ethan," she remarked casually, sipping champagne. "You used to thrive in settings like this. Now you look like you'd rather be anywhere else." Her observation caught him off guard, forcing him to confront a truth he had been avoiding. He no longer belonged in this world. His priorities had shifted, and pretending otherwise felt hollow. Without hesitation, Ethan excused himself, leaving Vanessa mid-conversation. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, he realized he had made his choice. That chapter of his life was over. When Ethan arrived at Clara's apartment later that night, she opened the door with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "What are you doing here?" she asked, though her tone lacked its usual edge. Ethan stepped inside, his hands trembling slightly, as he pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside were signed papers, relinquishing any claims to assets tied to his fortune. "I wanted you to know," he said quietly, "that I'm not here for anything other than you and Liam. This isn't about money or image. It's about being a real part of your lives." Clara stared at the papers, her heart racing. She had always assumed Ethan's wealth was inseparable from who he was. Yet here he was, willingly setting it aside for them. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at him, seeing not just the man he had become, but also the effort it must have taken to let go of something so central to his identity. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Because I love you," he replied simply. "And I want to prove it, not with words, but with actions." Their reconciliation didn't happen overnight. Clara remained cautious, testing the boundaries of their renewed connection. But slowly, she began to let her guard down, allowing herself to hope again. Together, they navigated the challenges of co-parenting, learning to communicate openly and support each other through the ups and downs. Ethan continued to grow, embracing imperfection and finding strength in vulnerability. Clara, in turn, rediscovered the parts of herself she had buried during their marriage, the dreams, the laughter, the resilience. Meanwhile, Lucas remained a steady presence in Clara's life, though his role shifted as her relationship with Ethan deepened. They parted ways amicably, Lucas understanding that while he cared deeply for Clara, her heart belonged elsewhere. "Take care of her," he told Ethan one day, his tone firm but kind. "She deserves nothing less." Ethan nodded, grateful for Lucas's empathy and respect. In the end, it was Liam who brought them full circle. Watching their son grow, his first steps, his infectious giggles, his boundless curiosity, reminded Ethan and Clara of what truly mattered. Life wasn't about control or perfection. It was about connection, love, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. As they stood side by side one crisp autumn morning, watching Liam chase leaves in the park, Ethan reached for Clara's hand. "We're going to be okay," he murmured, squeezing her fingers gently. Clara smiled, leaning into him. For the first time in years, She believed him. Their journey had been messy, painful, and unpredictable, but it had led them to this moment. And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the season and the warmth of their little family, they found peace.